Ryan stood at the kitchen counter, watching Amber tie her hair back with a casual flick of her wrist. She moved like a woman with nothing to hide, keys jingling as she tossed them into her purse. "I'll be back in 20, she said over her shoulder, dropping a light kiss on his cheek like a punctuation mark. Routine, automatic, almost too smooth. He nodded, not bothering to ask where she was going. Just the store, he assumed. That was what she always said lately. Just the store, just a few errands, just need some air. The word "just" had become her shield, a way of making everything sound smaller than it really was, and for a while it worked. Until it didn't. The front door closed with a familiar soft thud. The sound echoed longer in the silence than it should have. Ryan stood there, coffee mug warm in his hand, eyes drifting to the clock. 4:13 p.m. He sipped, waited. It was stupid to feel this way, he told himself. She'd said 20 minutes, maybe 25, but lately time moved differently between them. Conversations felt too rehearsed, like she'd practiced them in the mirror. Her smile was still there, sure, but it felt like a performance for a show he hadn't agreed to watch. He walked into the living room, sat down in the armchair that faced the window. From here, he could see the driveway where her car had been parked just moments ago. Empty now, just like her side of the bed lately, which had started to feel cold even when she was in it. Something told him today wouldn't be like the other days. Maybe it was the way her voice rose just a little too brightly when she said goodbye. Maybe it was how she lingered at the door, almost like she was stalling, waiting for something. For guilt to catch up, maybe? At 4:39 p.m., Ryan stood. No text, no call. He grabbed his keys, phone, and jacket. No plan, just movement. It wasn't about being paranoid anymore. It was about confirming what his gut already knew. The drive to the store was short, just 10 minutes, but each second stretched like a wire about to snap. His heart thudded against his ribs, like it knew something he didn't. When he pulled into the parking lot, he didn't go in. Didn't need to. Instead, he parked in the far corner of the lot, engine off, windows down just enough to hear the outside world breathe. He waited and watched. Ryan leaned back in his seat, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other tapping idly against his thigh. The lot was busy but not chaotic, just a typical Saturday evening rush at the local grocery store. Shopping carts squeaked, car doors slammed, and people drifted in and out of the sliding glass entrance carrying plastic bags, laughter, and the weight of the ordinary. But Amber wasn't one of them. He kept scanning. His eyes moved from the front doors to the surrounding cars to the sidewalks and then back to the doors again. Still no sign of her. He'd been there for 15 minutes, and the knot in his chest had started to pull tighter, like someone was drawing it slowly through a winch. At first, he tried to rationalize. Maybe she was in a long line. Maybe the store was understaffed again, like it always seemed to be on weekends. Maybe she stopped to chat with someone from the neighborhood. But as the minutes ticked on and the excuses piled up, they all started sounding like weak stage props, meant to distract from a collapsing set. He unlocked his phone. No new messages. He scrolled through their recent texts. Short, clipped, functional. Need anything else from the store? Can you grab milk? Don't forget your mom's birthday is next week. All logistical. All surface. It struck him how long it had been since a message felt warm or spontaneous. When had the small talks stopped being small joys and started feeling like obligation? He checked the time again. 5:01 p.m. She left at 4:13, nearly an hour. A slow, crawling sense of realization began to move through him, not fast or explosive, but cold and steady, like water seeping under a locked door. Instinct told him not to go inside. Something stronger than logic whispered that whatever he needed to see wasn't in the aisles of produce and cereal. It was somewhere else, somewhere just outside the narrative Amber had been carefully curating for months. So he stayed in the car, letting his eyes follow the pulse of the parking lot. And that's when he saw her. At first it was only a flash of her coat, a color he recognized immediately, a deep wine red she wore when she wanted to feel put together. She wasn't coming out of the store. She was walking from the far side of the lot, away from the store entirely. Her gait was light, confident, There was no sign of rush or guilt in her body language. Ryan's heart slowed in a strange, deliberate way. It wasn't panic, it was clarity. He leaned forward slightly, shielding his face behind the frame of the rearview mirror. He watched as Amber approached a car parked several rows down from his. Not hers. A silver sedan. Familiar. The driver's door opened before she got there, like he'd been waiting for her. She smiled. Full, warm, the kind of smile she hadn't given Ryan in months. Then she laughed, reached out and touched the man's shoulder as she slid into the passenger seat. The door shut. The car didn't pull away right away. They were talking. Easy. Comfortable. Ryan didn't need to see the man's face to know. But he did anyway. When the guy adjusted his rearview mirror, the brief flash of his profile made everything snap into place. Ethan. The friend of a friend, the one who always seemed like he was just around, never too close, never too far. A face Ryan had never thought twice about. Until now. Ethan. The man who helped Amber with her car battery last spring, the one who dropped by when Ryan was working late, the one she swore was just a nice guy from her office building, and suddenly it all rearranged itself. The extra care with her makeup before quick errands, the new perfume that just came in a free sample, the way she started turning her phone screen face down when she set it on the table. All the signs were there. He just hadn't let himself connect them. But now they connected themselves. He sat there, not moving, not breathing too loudly, as Ethan finally started the engine. The car backed out slowly, casually. Ryan's grip tightened on the steering wheel, but he made no move to follow. He didn't need to. He'd already followed her far enough. Instead, he reached into the center console and pulled out his phone again, not to text, not to call. He opened the camera app and zoomed in just as Ethan reached across and tucked a strand of Amber's hair behind her ear. Her eyes closed for a second, like she had waited for that touch all day. Click. One photo. Just one. Not to confront her with, not yet. Just to remind himself that he wasn't crazy. That what he saw was real. That the unease had a name and a face and a body now. Ryan put the phone down, started the car, drove home in silence. The confrontation would come later, but now there was no suspicion, only truth. By the time Ryan pulled into the driveway, the sky was shifting from muted gray to the kind of deep indigo that signaled the day's final stretch. He sat in the car with the engine idling, the rhythmic pulse of the turn signal clicking into the quiet cabin like a ticking clock. His eyes stayed on the windshield, unfocused, while the rest of him replayed what he'd seen in the parking lot. Frame by frame, breath by breath. There was no more room for guessing, no space left for benefit of the doubt. Amber hadn't lost track of time. She hadn't been trapped in a long line. She hadn't bumped into an old friend and caught up over coffee in the cafe by the florist's stand. She hadn't done any of the things she might try to claim. Instead, she had walked, purposefully, deliberately, into someone else's passenger seat, into someone else's life, even if just for the afternoon, and the way she looked when she did it. That was what haunted Ryan most. She had looked free, not conflicted, not guilty. She had smiled like she belonged there. Once inside, Ryan didn't go to the kitchen or flip on the television like he might have done on any other Saturday. Instead, he headed straight for the office, an unassuming room at the back of the house filled with tax documents, loose change, and a printer that rarely worked when needed. He shut the door behind him and sat down, not at his desk, but in a low chair in the corner, where Amber once curled up with books before bed. From there, he stared at the single photo he'd taken. Amber stepping into Ethan's car, her smile tilted sideways, hand grazing his shoulder like it had done it 100 times before. The composition wasn't perfect, but the moment was undeniable. He didn't cry, not then. Anger hadn't come either. Instead, there was only a strange sense of weightlessness, like he had finally stopped treading water after months of exhaustion. The moment he captured wasn't explosive or dramatic. No screaming, no sudden betrayal. But maybe that was the worst part. It had been quiet, practiced, almost routine. Ryan scrolled through his camera roll and made a new folder titled simply Her. It wasn't bitterness that guided his fingers. It was the need to preserve truth, a truth she'd tried to bury beneath casual errands and breezy goodbyes, a truth he now held like a fragile artifact. He took a breath and opened his laptop. If this had happened once, it had likely happened before, and Ryan wasn't the kind of man who needed to dig for vengeance. He needed to understand, needed context, patterns, closure. Over the next 2 hours, he pulled up bank statements, checked time statements on Venmo payments Amber had dismissed as lunch with the girls, and reviewed the GPS history on the shared family plan she didn't know he had re-enabled. By the time the clock struck 8, he had 5 separate entries of her parked near Ethan's complex. Midday, weeknights, one early Sunday morning, always on the days she said she needed space or was running late after Pilates. There were no groceries, no yoga mats, no receipts for errands, just coordinates and silence. He bookmarked the data and leaned back, eyes burning from the screen. He wasn't the jealous type, had never followed Amber's movements before. They had a relationship built, at least in his mind, on openness, or perhaps more accurately, on the assumption of it. But now the veil was lifted. What once felt like random gaps in communication now looked like carefully spaced exits. Her phone always on silent at certain hours, her stories filled with the kind of detail that only liars bothered to master. Every moment in hindsight screamed warning signs, and he had ignored all of them. Until today. Eventually, Ryan stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured himself a glass of water. His hands weren't shaking, though they should have been. There was a strange calm inside him, like someone who had weathered the storm and found himself on dry land, albeit unfamiliar terrain. He looked around the house, really looked. The framed vacation photo from Tulum that Amber insisted they hang, even though Ryan thought it clashed with the dining room colors. The wine rack she had filled with bottles she rarely drank just for show. The small, unreadable sculpture on the mantel that Ethan once complimented in passing when he came over for a barbecue 2 summers ago. Had it started back then? A rustle of gravel outside signaled headlights sweeping across the driveway. Amber's car. He didn't rush to the door, didn't storm out to meet her. He simply waited. From the window he watched her get out, bags in hand, her phone held to her ear. She was laughing. Her smile hadn't faded. Still no trace of guilt. She stood outside her car for a few seconds before ending the call, then adjusted her coat like someone who had just been admired. And maybe she had. Ryan turned away and walked slowly to the dining table. He placed his phone down, screen facing up with the photo ready to display. He positioned himself at the head of the table, fingers loosely clasped, breathing steady. The truth was already on the table. Now he just had to see how she'd tried to talk her way around it, and this time he would listen. Not because he believed her, but because the final nail in a lie should be hammered in with silence. The front door opened with a soft creak, and Amber stepped inside like she always did, like this house was still hers in every way. She set her bags down gently by the entryway, glanced at her reflection in the hallway mirror, and fluffed her hair with a casual flick. Her coat still smelled faintly of her signature perfume, a scent Ryan used to find comforting, but now recognized as a mask, carefully chosen, expertly worn. "Hey!" she called out as she walked in, voice light, almost chipper. The line at the store was insane. I swear they had only one register open. I picked up some of those little things you like, those trail mix bars. She walked toward the kitchen, dropping her keys into the bowl near the fridge, pausing only when she finally saw him seated at the dining table. Her smile froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough for him to catch it. She adjusted, quick on her feet as always. "You okay? You're just sitting here in the dark like a vampire." Ryan didn't move. His elbows rested on the table, his hands folded together in front of him. His face gave nothing away. No anger, no heartbreak, not even curiosity. Just a man staring at someone he once knew, trying to decide if anything about her had ever been real. Amber took a step closer, her brow furrowed now. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone softer, like she sensed something had shifted and wasn't sure whether to run from it or lean in. Ryan's voice was calm, almost too calm. "You said the line was crazy." She blinked. "Yeah, it was. Why? He reached forward, picked up his phone, and turned it so the screen faced her. A single image stared back. Amber stepping into Ethan's car, hand grazing his shoulder, her smile careless and full. The kind of smile you don't wear while standing in line at a grocery store. She stared at the photo for a moment longer than he expected, long enough for the truth to land, but not long enough to summon a believable lie. She didn't gasp or deny it. Instead, she let out a short, almost disbelieving laugh. "Wow," she muttered, eyes narrowing slightly. "You followed me?" "No," Ryan said quietly. "I noticed the difference between a story and a routine. So I checked the story." Amber stepped back, folding her arms, the defensiveness rising like a shield. "And what? You sat out there like some kind of stalker?" "No," he repeated. "I sat out there like a husband who finally stopped pretending." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The space between them stretched, thick with a silence that carried too many unspoken things. Regret, guilt, anger, exhaustion. "I didn't plan for you to see that," she said finally, her voice quieter now. "It just happened." "No," Ryan said again, steady. "That didn't just happen. That's practiced, familiar. That was muscle memory." Amber opened her mouth, then closed it. She walked to the kitchen island and leaned against it like she needed something to hold her up. "Look, I wasn't going to keep it going. I was going to end it. Today was supposed to be the last time." Ryan didn't even flinch. "How many last times have there been?" She looked away, biting her lip like a teenager caught sneaking in past curfew. "I don't know. A few. It doesn't matter. I don't love him, Ryan. It's not love." He stood up now, slowly, deliberately, and walked around the table. "Then what is it? Is it fun? Is it a game? Is it escape?" She watched him approach, her jaw tightening. "It's different. It's a tension. It's not always about love, you know. Sometimes it's about feeling seen." Ryan stopped a few feet from her, his eyes cold but not cruel. "I saw you every day. I listened. I stayed. I tried. You just stopped being someone I could recognize." Amber's eyes filled with tears, not the kind that fall when hearts break, but the kind that come when someone realizes they've been caught in a net of their own making. "Ryan, I don't want to lose what we have." He raised a hand to stop her. "Amber, what we had depended on trust. You traded that in somewhere between the first lie and the first laugh in his car." Her voice cracked. "Please, don't do this like it's final." "It was final the moment you decided I didn't need to know the truth," Ryan said, walking past her. "I'm not yelling. I'm not throwing things. I'm not asking why, 'cause I already know the answer." She reached out, fingertips brushing his arm, but he stepped back before she could touch him. "So what now?" she whispered. "You go to bed, or to him, or wherever you want," he said, heading toward the hallway. "I'll sleep in the guest room." He paused at the doorway, looking back once. "Just so you know, Ethan, he's not the secret anymore. You are." Then he disappeared down the hall, his footsteps soft but final. Amber stayed frozen, alone with the hum of the refrigerator and the single photo still glowing on the table like a silent verdict. The next morning, the house was unnervingly still. Not quiet. Quiet implied peace, but still, like the breath had been pulled from its walls. Ryan woke early, not because he couldn't sleep, but because he had. Deep, dreamless sleep. The kind that follows clarity, not comfort. There was no tossing, no wondering, no pacing in the dark. He simply shut down, the way a machine does when it knows it no longer serves its purpose. He dressed in silence, not out of pettiness, but because there was nothing left to say. Amber hadn't come to the guest room. She hadn't knocked, hadn't left a note, hadn't made a sound. Maybe she stayed in their bedroom. Maybe she left again. He didn't care enough to check. In the kitchen, the coffee brewed just like it had every day for the past 12 years. The smell was the same, the routine identical, but everything else had changed. The simple act of pouring coffee into a cup felt like a performance, something done by a man who used to live here, before the floor shifted beneath him. He checked his phone out of habit, not hope. A single message from Amber blinked on the screen. "I'm sorry. I don't know what to say." He stared at it for a moment, then swiped it away. A sentence didn't fix what was broken, especially when that sentence came after months of intentional deceit. By noon, she was gone. No goodbye, just an emptied closet and the lingering trace of her perfume in the hallway. Ryan stood at the door of what used to be their shared bedroom and surveyed the damage. She hadn't taken everything, just enough to indicate that her decision had already been made, likely long before the confrontation the night before. The irony was almost poetic. She thought she was the one who chose. She thought she had the upper hand, the secret lover, the hidden car rides, the late returns cloaked in excuses. But in the end, it was Ryan who decided the narrative's final chapter. She left, not because she had control, but because her story had already collapsed under its own dishonesty. Ethan, for all his quiet convenience, vanished within days. Maybe he thought he was signing up for a thrill, a secret he could pocket. But Amber, arriving with bags and broken promises, was a different reality, one he hadn't prepared for. According to a mutual acquaintance, he ghosted her. No returned calls, no explanation, just silence. Fitting. Amber tried to reach out once more a week later. A longer message this time, filled with apologies, regret, the usual mess of "I never meant to hurt you" and "it just happened." Ryan didn't reply. He had already spoken the loudest possible truth the night she walked back in with her lie still on her lips, and found a photo waiting for her on the table. Friends asked questions. Some tried to be delicate. Others danced around the subject, offering vague sympathy. Ryan told them only what they needed to know. She left, he'd say. I let her. That was enough. But he didn't spiral. There was no breakdown. No vindictive smear campaign. He didn't post cryptic quotes on social media or drown himself in whiskey or bitterness. Instead, he did something far more unexpected. He rebuilt. He cleaned the house, not in a rage, but with purpose. He removed the framed photos of them together, not to erase her, but to make room for new memories that weren't anchored in pretense. He took walks. He saw old friends. He took a solo trip to the coast, where he sat for hours on a weathered bench overlooking the water, letting the wind undo everything she'd knotted inside him. And maybe that was the final turn she never expected. Not anger or revenge or public heartbreak, but stillness, dignity. He didn't collapse when the truth surfaced. He just stepped into it and moved forward.